Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the third of our series in discussions that we'll be having. We call them difficult discussions that we'll be having here at Positive Health Network. I'm just waiting for the two other panelists to join shortly, and we can kick it off. Thank you for being here. Welcome, Nomvelo. Um, I have Novella is going to be my co-host today, and you want to show your face a bit so that people can see you and they'll know what we're dealing with.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome.
Thank you, Novella. I will let you handle everything else, maybe the questions, if there's any question or if anybody needs to be allowed to speak so that we can just start. We're just waiting for the two other panelists to join so that we get going. Um, maybe do you think we need to pause the recording a bit before we continue, or
Yes, I'll say let's give it a minute or two and just pause and let me see if I can ring the other one real quick.
sure?
Good morning, by the way.
Good morning, Melissa, and welcome.
Welcome, Asha.
So sorry. I think I emailed saying that I was confused about the login because I came in as a participant.
Oh,
Uh,
did you?
Yeah, so it was here, but I was like, I don't know how to get. So I emailed everybody, but I don't think you got it yet. So anyway, I'm here now.
You're here now. We're happy to have you. I was actually trying to call you because I was thinking maybe there was a glitch with your internet or something.
Oh no, no, it's the mix up with the Zoom links.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
why. Oh
yeah.
yeah, that's okay. Um, I
I was
think
like, how do I get on? How do I
it's it's good that you're here now. So I think we'll just get started. If Reverend Nana manages to join us, then she will just catch on with the conversation, I guess.
Sounds good. Let's get started.
That's okay. Um, thank you very much for joining us and welcome to everyone who's attending. We are just going to start with a few novel. I'm just going to check with you if we are recording now.
1 second. Yes, I think we should be recording. It says recording on my end.
Okay. All right. So just so the other participants know, other than the panelists, everyone will be hidden to protect their privacy, and only those that will be allowed to speak will be able to speak. And after this session, we'll have a recording for everyone to re-watch maybe and share with those that cannot be with us today. I'm
Mm.
going to ask Nomvelo to do our land acknowledgement because we also have to acknowledge that we are on land that is not ours. Thank you, Nomvelo. I'll let you
Merci.
keep that on.
This time, we're just going to ground ourselves as we get into the land acknowledgement. So here at the Positive Health Network, we live and work upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, and the Huron and Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. This land is also covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase that was in 1792 between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the First Credit Nation. We also recognize the contributions of the Métis, Inuit, and other indigenous peoples that have made both in shaping and strengthening our communities, provinces, and country as a whole. We are grateful for the opportunity to work in this community among so many indigenous people from across the Turtle Island. We thank all the generations of people who, for 1,000 of years, have taken care of this land and each other. We also recognize that to do this work well, we must recognize that HIV is disproportionately affects Indigenous communities and that we must do more to integrate Indigenous ways of knowing into our model of care. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Nomvelo. So we are Positive Health Network. You can go on our website and have an understanding of what we do as an organization. And today I've got three beautiful panelists with us here. I will let them introduce themselves once we get started. But I'm so looking forward to having beautiful conversations with these ladies. And at the end, we'll have a survey. We'll just need to hear from you what you think of the conversation that we're going to have here. Thank you so much for being here. So hopefully Reverend Nana will join us. I'm just going to ask the two beautiful ladies to introduce themselves, whoever goes first. And you can just share anything if you're comfortable, maybe your experience about your faith history and the discussion that we're going to have here. It's about faith, HIV, and acceptance. Maybe you can just say something around that and whilst you introduce yourselves. I don't know who's gonna start, but I'll just
I
maybe
I can go if you would
sure,
like.
Asha.
Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Asha Aliso. I'm a community advocate and a researcher, like a research coordinator at Women's College Hospital, where I focus on HIV in women, from the lens of health equity. So my work is about building bridges between like healthcare and community, between research and lived experience. I come from a Muslim background. And because I'm visibly Muslim, my faith has always been a part of how I see the world and how the world sees me. For me, it has shaped like my resilience, my identity, and my community. I'm very excited to have this conversation because it really matters. HIV is not only a medical issue, it ties to stigma, belonging, and acceptance. So, for the Black community, HIV is a pressing issue. Black people are disproportionately affected by HIV in Canada, and most of us have a strong ties to faith traditions. Faith is a cornerstone for some of our lives. It's where we gather, where we find meaning, and where we seek resilience. So the faith community is essential partner in fighting stigma and educating people about HIV. So I'm very excited about this talk. Pass it on to my fellow panelists.
Thank you, Asha.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melissa Nyoni. I was born into the Seventh-day Adventist faith. Grew up a Seventh-day Adventist, a Protestant. That's a Protestant Christian denomination. For those that may not know, that we emphasize the second coming of Jesus, and we observe Saturday as the Sabbath. And so Seventh-day Adventists are active in healthcare, disaster, one of the largest disaster relief programs globally, community development, education, operating numerous schools and hospitals worldwide. So for the past 5 years, I have been traveling and sharing the gospel in different places of the world, in different continents, countries, states, Africa, Europe, Canada, and America. And so it's been a privilege and an honor to be used as what I call God's mouthpiece, to simply say what he says, repeat what he has inspired, and share it with others as it has impacted and continues to impact and change me, praying that that same effect can be true upon others' hearts. And so, God has promised that if we do our individual part, he will supply the power, he will move upon hearts, he changes and transform hearts, so that we get to see him face to face. So I left my career in chemical engineering to do what gives me peace and what I know now to be my duty. So I love meeting new people. I've spent the last few years developing relationships as I travel, learning different cultures, being exposed to different societies, and still coming to the realization that in the end, that the world needs Jesus. And so I'm excited and humbled to join this webinar. And I'd like to thank the organization, our great host, and um, my fellow friends here for the invitation to shed light on such an important subject, and my understanding of HIV is very limited, but it comes from a Zimbabwean context, and how HIV was perceived and understood in that country. Growing up, I didn't have direct contact with the whole HIV experience in Zimbabwe myself, but I would have conversations with my mother who, where I would listen to her perspective on the issue. And so, she was there at a time where HIV, she was a young girl in college when HIV, hit the nation. And one of the things she shares was that the history of HIV in Zimbabwe was not understood. And at that time, even worldwide, it wasn't understood. There was so much misinformation and undereducation on it. And so from how it was spread to how it was managed. So as a result of that, fear took over understanding, and as we're about to discuss today, the stigma becomes so overwhelming such that even our governments could not offer a safe environment, so that there was a lack of privacy in the health fields. Many people died from depression. So in Zimbabwe, there was a lack of understanding the physiology of HIV, but we also never accounted for its psychological effects. and on the mind. And so, I would argue that the psychological effects outweigh even the physical up until even now. So because of that stigma, the lack of privacy, lack of funding, lack of education, lack of awareness, lack of even preventative strategies, this caused trauma for over generations. So again, I think we have so much to talk about, but I am more than excited. That is my personal history with HIV. I'm excited to hear the different perspectives of all of us here today, and I'm eager to learn more, be open to greater understanding, to bridge the gap in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Melissa. I think you said a lot, actually. And maybe our discussions will be around what has your experience, maybe as somebody who is grounded strongly in some kind of faith, right? So we've got people with different beliefs, people believing in different things, and then they think that whatever they're believing in can actually be harmful to them at some point, or it can actually be good. So, in your experience, how have you seen, what have you seen, like, what has faith uh, been? Have you seen it being a good thing or a bad thing relating to stigma per se and HIV?
I can go.
Sure.
So, for me, I think that faith is powerful in shaping how people see HIV. It hasn't been tapped in the Black Muslim community as much. So when I think about the Muslim community, I think about like HIV is not spoken about, and then if it is, it's framed as like a moral flaw, kind of like shame or punishment for someone's actions. So because of this, like many people avoid like testing or treatment out of fear of like being judged. Um, and because I have a bit of research background, I always have to bring in some research. So
Yeah.
research shows that African Muslim youth in Ontario carry higher levels of stigma, less knowledge, and are less likely to get tested, which shows that it shows how deeply faith and culture influences perspectives. Um, and I'm going to also share some of I'm going to share with Mercy the papers that I'm talking about throughout
Okay.
this whole presentation, so that if
Sure.
you want to go ahead and read some of it, I really encourage it.
Okay.
So on the positive side, I think that faith has given a lot of people resilience. So mercy and compassion and justice are like central values. So when leaders choose to draw on these like teachings, they create communities that offer strength instead of stigma. So stigma is reinforced when people moralize HIV. So trying to make it a sin based on like promiscuity or drug use. Um, these taboos around sex and substance use means the topic is avoided altogether, which can only deepen the fear and misinformation. What people need to understand is that HIV affects their community. It doesn't matter how or why someone contracted it. It doesn't matter if you agree with someone's choices. It isn't your life, right? So what matters is that the person needs and deserves support and community. And one of the biggest teachings in Islam is treating people with kindly and supporting your community. By judging, shaming, and blaming, you're committing major sins in Islam. So it's like you're judging someone for doing a sin, but then you are also kind of sinning as well. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword. Um, and then I wanted to talk a little bit about a research study that I found was really interesting. It was done in, so sorry. It was done in Ontario. It was called Black Praise, Black Praise Intervention. And pastors spoke directly about HIV in their sermons. They distributed educational materials. They featured films with lived experience, and the congregates reported lower stigma and greater knowledge. This shows that faith communities lead with compassion and facts becomes healing, and it also prevents HIV. So um, I can also send that to Mercy so that people can read more about that. I think it was a really, really, really well done study. And honestly, I learned a lot from reading that. Um, so, uh, yeah, so I think I've talked a lot. So I'm going to let my panelists talk a little bit more, but I can go on and on about this particular topic. But yeah.
Oh, there's more to talk about. So yes. I think Melissa, you can take that one as well.
All right. So, in my church, specifically the global organization, they do have a ministry called Adventist AIDS International Ministry. So it doesn't just deal with AIDS, but the HIV epidemic. So they manage the epidemic appropriately and effectively, whether it's in the workplace, offering support, comforting the community. As for us, we're told as a Christian response and duty. So I think when it comes to the perspective of, shaping the perspective of HIV, I think at large, the global church does try within the disaster relief and health departments does try to educate globally in areas where the HIV epidemic may be dense. In that, with that comes addressing the challenges of HIV and AIDS. It comes with the education of it. It comes with supplying the communities with the resources that they need in order to manage HIV. So I think when it comes to perspective, it has certainly the church has helped its members and its people within the faith to look at it and have a different perspective in shaping, in changing, and challenging those stigmas, I believe. Now, maybe the downside of it would be, again, I do believe that this specific ministry is more active in HIV dense, what we would call HIV dense locations, or locations that may not have the resources, like, which may be Africa, different parts of Asia. So we don't see it as much. Like for me, I grew up more in North America. I do not see that approach as strong in North America. I haven't had those discussions in a church setting about HIV. So I would say maybe those conversations can be had in the North American context. That would help. Another thing that I would say would help, where our faith helps shape the perspective, is, we are taught Jesus's approach, his approach in meeting people and evangelizing to people and changing people's lives. And that demonstrated compassion. He ministered to people's needs. So he would come, he would be a friend, he'd meet you where you are, he would minister to the need. He would win your confidence, and then he would present the gospel message through a holistic method. It wasn't just spiritual, but he dealt with mental, he dealt with the physical. And that was his method of service and proclaiming his gospel. He showed sympathy. He cared for the human need. He spoke the truth with love and tact, and he called people to follow him after establishing these connections. So by following his approach in whatever you do, that sort of shapes the way that your perspective and how you are dealing with people who are affected with various types of, whether it's conditions, diseases, or whether it's even someone who's made a mistake, and in such ways. So I think that method of evangelizing does help for us to see people in the right way. Another thing that's very important in our faith is our personal duty to our own health, and that comes with the education of. And so we are, as members of this global church, we are encouraged, we are taught, we constantly are open to, or, are exposed to different types of teachers, different types of resources that help us get to know the human body, get to know our personal duty to that, not just depending on doctors, but getting to know how do we manage our bodies and keep them in a healthy state? How do we even deal with certain things that come upon us? So I think that education does help in shaping our perspective.
Thank you very much, Melissa. This is getting interesting. So maybe I can go on to something that we see as service providers, right? When we talk HIV in the communities, when people hear HIV, they think promiscuity, they think recklessness, and there's some kind of shame that comes with that because of the stigma, of course. If somebody comes here and they're HIV positive, somebody will think that they were sleeping around. They're probably just reckless with their life. We're talking about maybe someone is saying that they were because they were using drugs, they got it that way, or because they had too many sexual partners, they've got that. So can you speak to shame, the shame that comes with I'm putting shame in quotes because uh, that's not how we want to see it. But can you speak to shame as your faith sees it, or and what faith leaders can do to maybe create spaces that are accommodative to people who are living with HIV?
Um, yeah, I can go. So for from my perspective, I think shame is one of the most coercive forces that I've seen in my work. So I now work in research, but before that, I was a frontline worker. And so I saw in real time what shame can do to people. It can cause them to feel like they can't get tested, they can't go to um, see, they can't even go to places where like clinics where it has HIV on it or something like that, just feeling like someone's going to judge me. Um, and so yeah, so I've also seen shame like for people who acquired HIV through sex or substance use, often sometimes they would like internalize the idea that they're like a bad person. Um, Shame keeps people in denial and keeps them from getting the supports that they need. But shame is a human construct. It's not divine. So in Islam, God is Al-Rahman, Al-Rahim, the most compassionate, the most merciful. And compassion and inclusion restores and shame like diminishes people. And so leaders have a responsibility to dismantle some of the shame by naming it for what it is and replacing it with compassion and inclusion. That is how communities move from stigma to healing and education. Um, I think also what people need to understand is that HIV is a virus that doesn't discriminate based on your religion, your background, anything like that. It's a virus. It's going to infect anyone that it can infect. So the thing that people need to understand is that you're thinking that, oh, like this won't affect. So from my experience, a lot of Muslim people think that like it doesn't affect them from the circles that I've seen. When in reality, the numbers are showing that it is affecting them too. And sometimes even worse because of the stigma and the silence. So what people need to understand is that if we want to work towards eradicating HIV, you need to take it from all angles and reach people where they're at. So religious leaders have a huge responsibility, and I would advise particularly Muslim religious leaders to talk on this because I don't see a lot of that happening, especially in the Canadian context. Um, and it has detrimental effects. So I would say talking on that, doing HIV 101, and realizing that even though something is considered a quote unquote sin, it is something that people are doing. And we shouldn't be judging, and we should be coming from a lens of acceptance. Um, yeah.
Thank you, Asha. Melissa, do you have something to add on to that?
Yes, when it comes to the concept of shame and how it relates to my faith, um, God's love, knowing that God's love never changes. Like, it doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter what my condition, my medical condition may be. It doesn't matter what I'm going through, my external circumstances. So by understanding that my value to God never shifts at any point, and that his love never changes, no matter what may be the issue, no matter what may be the circumstance, then what's important when it relates to my faith is switching your mindset, sort of a shift in mindset, redirecting your thoughts to look at, how does God view me? Not how does the world view me? Not the stigmas that people may have, their opinions of me, not even what I think of myself, because that's usually shaped by society. It's usually shaped by the people around you. It's usually shaped by whatever it may be. But how does God view me? And in knowing how he views me, that he paid a high price. He essentially chose me over his son. He put the thing that he loved the most at risk for my life. And so that's a high price, And so understanding that shame is a part of the human experience. Nothing is wrong. Nothing is wrong with you for feeling shame. It's a part of the human experience. It's a painful feeling. It's humiliation. It's distress. So I think of the stories in the Bible, like Adam and Eve. They sinned. And after that, the Bible tells us that they were, God, he spoke and he said, "Where are you?" And they covered themselves. So that was an act of shame. You're covering yourself. You're in humiliation. You're in distress. You recognize that something is wrong. And he says, "How do you know?" So that conversation shows us that God came to them. They didn't go to God. So even in their humiliation, even in their distress, even though they felt unworthy, he still approached them. And so God's love never changes. God never adjusts. He stays where he is. We may move further. We may have strong feelings. We may be humiliated. We may not feel whole, but he still remains where he is. And he's always chasing after us. And so again, shame is a part of the human experience, but it all comes down to, when it comes to the faith that I practice, the faith that I believe in, is that I have to sort of overwhelm my thoughts with his promises, overwhelm my thoughts with his love and his mercy, and that will reach to the deepest parts of my heart and sort of lift me up. So faith lifts us up out of that prison and gives us the assurance of what God says over what I think and what people may say. And so that's what's important.
Thank you very much, Melissa. That is something that maybe some kind of education would fix in the perspectives that people have. So I will move on to something I think that is quite difficult when it comes to faith and the different perspectives that people have towards people living a certain way, right? And we always talk about welcoming congregations when we say, "Oh, this congregation is welcoming," and we are talking about HIV. That is something that is shunned upon, that is looked at as something that is acquired through, very bad ways. And then we get to a point where we are talking about maybe gender diversity as well. We've got populations of gender diverse people who are also living with HIV, but also we've got faiths that look at those populations in a way that would say maybe on the wrong side of what they believe in. Um, could you speak to that? Like, how accommodating is your faith towards those populations? I'll be specific, like gender diverse populations, and they're also living with HIV. And we're saying that this is an epidemic, right? And the same people need support. How has faith shaped that? Maybe you could give examples of how maybe in your religion you have taken a step forward in making that happen for people living with HIV, and there are also people who are part of the population that are gender diverse.
That's a big question. Uh,
It is
um,
it is a big one.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so I'll talk on my own experience. So I'm not representing all Muslims when I'm talking right now, because that would be crazy. There's one point I don't know how many billion Muslims in this world. And so I can only speak from what I've seen in my community. Um, so I think for my community, when it comes to gender diverse people and say people living with HIV, again, I think I said this like 6 times, but it's like it's not talked about. And it's like an uncomfortable conversation for people to have in religious spaces that are I've been to. And I think that that needs to be changed a bit, because actually it needs to be changed a lot, because I think that there's a lot of learning opportunity, and it gives like I'll talk on a little bit of like what I've seen religion do for some of my clients, even for myself. It has so I've seen it like people leaning on their prayers, their rituals, their community support as a lifeline. And so when you feel ostracized from the community, let's say you're a newly diagnosed person, um, it's the fear of like, oh, I'm not gonna have that community anymore. So from what I know, from my experience, is that a lot of people living with HIV will not, they'll keep their faith and their HIV status separate. And they do that to protect themselves, because the fear of rejection is so big and wide. And also like not being able to gauge like what is the community's knowledge on this situation if I bring it to people. And it's sad because especially for newly diagnosed people, they will like they need support. Like they just found out that they have a lifelong disease. And to think that you can't go to the people that you originally would go to in situations like this, like say for another health condition, you would be able to go to your religious or your faith-based spaces and be like, I'm going through this because, and I'm feeling bad. And, you'll get support, but it's different with HIV. And it's very sad, but also I've seen like I think there's been lots of studies done on this, but it shows like when people have faith backgrounds and they're able to lean back on their faith, um, the health condition becomes easier to manage. There's just so much mental health and physical health benefits of having spirituality. Um, and there's tons and tons of like literature that talks about this. So I really think that this is a point in time where we need to dismantle some of that issues that we have in the Muslim community when it comes to talking about these topics, because there is a lot of healing and support that's untapped. And I think that also um, I'm like cognizant of maybe I won't say that one. But I'm thinking about like because I'm trying to be really like careful about how I talk about this, because it's no shock that like in the Canadian context we have is a lot of Islamophobia, right? So I worry that like if I make it seem like Muslim people are not like Muslim people are accepting, and there's lots of accepting spaces, but I worry that like if I talk too much on this, then I might also be ostracizing my own community. So it's kind of like finding a fine line. If I'm going to be completely honest, and I'm sorry if I'm rambling because
It's understandable. It's
yeah,
understandable. This is a very
but
delicate.
I do think that that's very important, especially so when I'm thinking about like newcomer populations. I think that this is particularly important aspect, because like for many Black newcomers or Muslim newcomers, faith is like their anchor in a new country. So like once you've lost like your normal like culture and like it's a lot of change when you move to a new country, right? So one thing that a lot of people do when they come to a new country is make community and look into their faith communities. And so they can bring culture, like just to think about some of that aspects. So it makes it even more urgent that faith communities provide accurate information and open support. Um, yeah, I really task the Muslim community to talk more on these issues because I really haven't seen it. And if someone's in the audience and they have seen it, please share it with us because I would love to see more.
Thank you, Asha, and thank you for being careful. We all need to do that. Yeah, this is a very delicate topic. Yeah, it's quite difficult. Yeah. So I think Melissa, you can maybe speak to that as well.
Okay. So, I quickly, the text that came to me was, Jesus once said, come to me all, who are weary and burdened, and that's where I don't know if you've heard in the Christian denominations, the Christian faith, come as you are. That's essentially where that statement's coming from. That, he's calling all who are weary and burdened. And are we not all weary and burdened, right? So that is, in other words, no one is turned away. So when it comes to welcoming congregations, if Christianity, which is to be Christ-like, to imitate your Savior, essentially is what that is defined by, then whatever Jesus did is what we should do. So whether you have, whatever gender identity, different expressions, sexual preferences, whether it's medical conditions, whether it's even personal sins, all of us are called. No one is turned away from him. And it's just for us to consent on whether or not we want to accept the love of God or not. And so, again, we are to imitate that. So I would say that that is in general what, those of my faith are encouraged to do. Now, here's the dilemma. I think the history of the world in general shows, worldwide in different cultures and different societies, especially with the generational differences and exposures that, even when it comes to sexual preferences, identity and expression, it wasn't always like this. It wasn't always as out there. We now have federal laws, provincial laws, state laws that, make it so that people are more comfortable. People are what's the word? Are protected, are have the freedom to express what it is that they prefer, what it is that they want, however way they want to be identified. That always wasn't the case. So the world, I would say, there are people out of ignorance who may not respond, even within the faith context, in a way that you would expect, in a way, even that follows what Christ would do. Because of the lack of, again, as we're speaking about, the lack of education. And I once read a quote, in a book, I'm paraphrasing, that said, sympathy is born out of personal experience. For example, if you've experienced breast cancer, most people who will go on these 5K, 10K runs to raise awareness for breast cancer are those who've been affected by it. Maybe your mother had it, maybe your aunt had it, whatever. But the point is, it's being born out of personal experience so that you become an advocate for the things that you've personally experienced. So I say that to say, even when it comes to welcoming certain things that are not as, based on history, not as, things that we're used to for different generations and different people, even within the faith, the important thing is educate. And if it's not education, then for some of us, we're going to have to learn through personal experiences where a child, a friend, a relative has, ends up going through it. How many parents have we met? I've personally met who, a few years ago, this was a different conversation. They had a different reaction to stuff like, the subject at hand. But out of personal experience, maybe a child who's now experiencing this, there's sort of a shift. There's sort of more sympathy, more compassion. So I think, again, the lack of education, the lack of exposure does play a role in the way that people respond, whether they're welcoming or not. And so I do think that sometimes we have to give people a level of mercy, even when they don't respond the right way, because some people genuinely do not understand. And until personal experience comes, until you are more educated, and we go out of our ways to educate and make sure people understand and do what we're doing now, then people sort of come around to understand it more. I do think that the other dilemma when it comes to faith is really trying to understand what the Bible says and what God says, and our translation of that, of his commands, and in his standard to us in this society. We're so fluctuating, it's one thing like today, it's another thing yesterday. So it's sort of hard. You have the people who are kind of stern in their minds, older generations who are stuck in their ways, because they're going by the textbook. This is what it says, and this is what's happening. But again, sympathy is character. Love is character. Mercy is character. Kindness is character. That does not change, irrespective of what somebody's personal choices are. So I think there's a lot, whether it's education in the faith and understanding Christ's approach, whether it's education and understanding people's choices, or or even their medical conditions. Educate, educate, educate would be my response.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I think you've touched on something that I was going to ask, um, which is education, right? And you being a faith leader, maybe you could enlighten us on what role you have in making that work, or in making that happen. And also, maybe I could just bunch all my questions in one. Uh, what do you think can be done for, or maybe how do you think faith leaders can collaborate with service providers to be able to serve people living with HIV? And also, Asha touched a bit on newcomers. So we've got people who are new to Canada, they're struggling with their faith. You also mentioned that people actually want to separate their faith from their HIV status. And that alone can make somebody, lose it, or they can actually be lost in care, or they can actually, if they don't have the right support, they may not be able to live a good life psychologically or even physically, because they do not have that support. So maybe as faith leaders, what do you think can be done? In what ways do you think faith leaders can collaborate with health providers for them to be able to serve their congregants, or whoever follows their religion, for them to be, better served and better supported, so to speak?
Okay, I guess I'll take this one. I'll give you a few examples, maybe that will help. But one day I developed like a cyst-like infection around my buttocks area. Too much information, but nonetheless, I found myself at the ER. I got really, really bad, and I was in need of surgery. So I got to the ER, and then I passed out. So the next thing I remember was waking up, and at the end of my, or where my feet were at the bedside, was my pastor from my local church. And I'm looking at him and I'm like, what are you doing here? How do you know I'm here? And he goes, I'm the hospital chaplain. And then he prayed with me. My family hadn't come yet. And he sat there just for like about 5 minutes. He did. And then he went around, and I could see him sort of walking around. So I use that example to say, as a faith leader, he was functioning or volunteering as a hospital chaplain. He didn't have to do that. He has his salary as a local church pastor over there. He has a lot of responsibilities to take care of. But during the week, I found him as a member in the hospital at St. Joseph's as a hospital, servicing as a hospital chaplain. So these are ways that faith leaders you can instill in the context of your education, your level of faith, or whatever it is. You can find ways to be engaging in the community. There are within the church organization, there are health professionals, just as regular members. You will find nurses, you can find doctors, just in any church congregation. So it's important to for the church to create a system that maybe you might have, like we have a health department that is filled with health professionals, that may be nurses, dietitians, and doctors, and they lead that department to sort of address these things. They can address supporting people with HIV, having educational resources for them, having programs, whatever it may be, linking up with the community. I know when they have fairs at Gage Park, my church will go and set up a first aid tent where they focus on high blood pressure. They'll take people's blood pressures, they'll educate on managing high blood pressure, and whatnot. So these are ways that faith leaders can, by using the talent and the level of professionalism within their congregations to reach out, because the nurse knows, based on her profession, she may know who to reach out to, which organization she can work with. The businessman, the accountant can know such and such. The pastor can maybe volunteer as a hospital chaplain. So by creating a system that addresses much more than just, hey, God is good. We know that, theology, but we're looking again, Jesus' approach, at a holistic approach, that there are physical needs. There are things that we need to deal with. That there are ways that we need to connect with those who are not like us in the community. Then this approach will aid even the church for the subject at hand.
Thank you, Melissa. I think, Novella, there's a question for the panelists.
Yes, so there's a question or more of a comment, so maybe either one of you can speak to it. I have accepted that I'm HIV positive and I'm Roman Catholic. I'm sorry I've prayed to God so many times, but yet He has not been there for me when I was thrown in jail. I have looked upon myself and staying strong for myself and had faith in myself. I feel that God has not been there for me. Thank you.
Anyone wants to speak to that? Or
I think Melissa.
Okay. I can speak from personal experience, not with HIV, but just with life circumstances. A lot of times you are hoping that God will change your circumstance. And that's the only way that you'll have proof that He's there for you, because you're not going to hear His voice. You're not going to see Him. And so without changing your circumstance or making it more easier or maybe giving you what it is that you desire, you sort of feel like He's not there for you. But He promised that He'll never leave us nor forsake us. So the point I'm trying to make is oftentimes God is looking to change us in the circumstance rather than change the circumstance in itself. Then there are times where He does change the circumstance while He's changing you. But the point of all of this, the point of the gospel, in terms of the Christian faith, is that God is trying to transform our hearts. That is, to transform our character so that we're like Him. So if that means you may remain with this medical condition, if that means that there's a person who may remain in prison, He's still going to reach out to you within your circumstance. He may not change it, but He's going to reach out to you, whether it's through reminding you in your mind of verses, of stories in the Bible. You can look to the stories of Joseph. You can look to the stories, Joseph was in prison. He was in there for a long time. He was innocent. He was there for no reason, without a cause. But God never left him. He never forsook him. Instead, He used that situation to train his character as he was exposed to, being educated on how the justice system works and how innocent people are placed in prison. Because one day, eventually, Joseph was going to be the leader of Egypt, and he would need to judge the nation. So God used that circumstance, left him in that circumstance, but used that for His good. So you'll read in Genesis chapter 50, what you meant for evil, God turned it around for the good. So essentially, that's the hope that we should have, that sometimes God doesn't change the circumstance, but He's always looking to change you. And you must be reassured, remind yourself of His promises. He said He'll never leave you or nor forsake you. So if my feelings tell me that He's not there for me, He's telling me that He is there for me. And it comes in different ways, in ways that sometimes I do not get to see. But you can, count your blessings, name them one by one. Every day you get up, you have another opportunity to live, to make things right, to change the mindset. So God changes the mind usually before He changes the circumstance. And for every situation, every circumstance that we're in this life, as long as we're in right standing with God every morning, confessing our sins and lifting our hearts up to Him, willing to do His will, He will put you in a position as He grooms you throughout your life circumstances day to day. And, no season is permanent. it'll end. Again, no season is permanent, even the mind. But again, redirect the thoughts to his word, and that is how he'll be there. He will empower you and give you the peace that surpasses all understanding.
Thank you, Melissa. Asha, do you want to speak to that before Nomvelo?
Yeah, first of all, I really wanna thank you for first of all sharing that experience. It's not an easy thing to share. And I think you've opened up a conversation that really a lot of people, I've heard this so many times from a lot of different people when I worked in frontline. Um, and first of all, I want to just say that I want to reassure you of your feel. So what you're going through right now is a lot. I really want you to take care of yourself. I think you said that you have support, or sorry, let me just look at the question. Sorry. Um, there are a lot of like support groups, even with like I'm not even thinking about faith-based right now. I'm just thinking about like um HIV related supports. From like depending on where you live, there's stuff out there. Um, again, I'm very sorry that that was your experience, but it is valid. Um, what you're experiencing is valid, and all of that. I want to just share a little story of someone I know that I've worked with closely, who was in a very similar situation as you. For several years, she was a very faithful person. Like she was Christian, and she relied heavily on her faith up until her HIV diagnosis. And her life really did fall apart um, when she first found out. And one thing that she really leaned on to was the fact that um, there was a time where she wasn't dealing with religion. She was focused on more of um, her health, her well-being, and trying to get the supports that she needs. And maybe that's something that you need to focus on. Um, but I also wanted to echo kind of what Melissa said in the sense that God is the most merciful, the most kind. In our religion, we believe that. And what we believe in Islam is that everything, like this world is a test, and it's difficult. But you can find pockets of joy and support with it. There are people out there who are able to support you. Um, but basically, what happened with her is that at first she wasn't dealing with religion, but later um, she realized that everything happened for a reason. And now she's a community advocate who goes to church and all that stuff. And she uses that as like, maybe God gave me this test so that I can help others in a situation like this. So in this season right now, just take care of yourself. Um, know that there are lots and lots of supports out there. And if you do decide that you want to revisit your faith, just remember that I don't want to say everything happens for a reason, but things happen, and sometimes it's to better us. And so for an example of her, she made a whole career out of supporting Black women who are Christian to talk more about this stuff. And she's like a forefront person. So um, these things, yeah. So she sees it now as like she was used to help her community and to break some of this stigma down. But that's not for everyone, and maybe that's not for you. But it just goes to show you that in a situation like this, yeah, there could be some good that comes out of it. But yeah, sorry, I mumbled a lot.
No, that's okay. I think we can have from down below what other question we've got.
All right. So before I get to the other comment, there's two comments. So the first comment reads, every day I confess my sins, I pray to God, but I still don't feel that God is there for me. Sorry, that's just the way I feel. And then the second one, thank you. One of the major challenges I've seen in churches is disclosure, which often arises from being a fear of being judged by other church members. I once faced a challenge when I was asked to form a church HIV support group to create a safe space that would assist people living with HIV and bring hope to them. However, I was unable to establish the group, perhaps because people were afraid to disclose their status due to fear of being judged and stigmatized. Some people also think it's no longer important to talk about it in church. They rather prefer other topics such as cancer.
Yeah, I think it boils down to what we spoke about earlier about shame and the stigma that comes with being HIV positive, and people are thinking that maybe you were promiscuous and stuff like that. So people end up not wanting to disclose because they fear being judged. And that's why we're actually having this conversation about faith, religion, and acceptance in general. And I think we've actually spoken a lot around that. But maybe we could hear from Asha and Melissa, like what you think would be the ideal situation, or maybe how do you envision, the faith side of things and science working hand in hand for better HIV care, for people living with HIV, for better HIV care as well as inclusion. How do you
Yeah.
envision like faith and science? I know that can actually be oil and water in some instances, but I'm sure there can be something that is ideal, something that, well, we start from the very bottom right to get to the top. So maybe from your point of view, how would you envision that?
Um, yeah, I would say, first of all, I want to just say to the two people that put in the chat, your experience is your experience. And I'm sorry that this has not been an easy time for you. And um, yeah, and you're valid in feeling the way that you feel. For what we can do, bridging the gap between like science and religion or faith-based spaces, I think there needs to be a bigger. So I think this is, if I'm going to be honest, okay, I think that this is bigger than HIV in the sense that like faith and religion have always had like a bit of a head-on, and a lot of like a lot as a person who has faith and is in sciences, or has been in sciences in the past, the thing that I always had a hard time with is straddling between like the two, because I feel like the science community, there's a lot of atheism, um, which is fine. People are allowed to have like be believe or not believe what they want. Um, but it also kind of ostracizes those who have faith and want to also learn more. And I think that we've talked a lot today about how faith-based spaces need to invite healthcare providers and invite people over, but we don't also talk about science-based places, researchers, doctors, healthcare providers also reaching out to faith-based spaces. It's a two-way street, in my opinion. And I think that one of the reasons why research and healthcare has such huge gaps, especially for people of color, is because they're not actively engaging faith-based spaces. Also, I get that there's a lot of like religious trauma that a lot of people have. And so sometimes uh um sometimes when we think about like HIV supports in general, sometimes they might not talk about religion because they don't want to traumatize or like re-trigger people. But it is also not doing justice for those who have faith and would benefit from that, if I'm making sense. So it's like you want to accommodate. It's like basically what I'm trying to say is that it's two-way streets. And I think that it's responsibility of both the science community and the science and healthcare community and the faith-based community to come together and see the bigger picture of we want to eradicate HIV. We want to have better health care and supports for people, and knowing that faith is not going away for people, but also science is obviously not going away. So we need to come together and find a good balance. I think that's really important. I also think that like just holding like educational sessions on HIV and having more conversations, even if it's informal conversations about HIV in faith-based settings, that could really, really help. But yeah, so I just think that it's now time to bridge it. And maybe this is a conversation that will plant the seed to something much bigger. Because I see something happening after this talk.
I see that too.
Yeah.
I see it too. Yeah, do you want to speak to that too, Melissa?
Yes, and just like Asha touched on the two comments, the comment that touched on the challenges that they've seen in churches and disclosure, I would just say to that, I think at the beginning I did talk about how my personal experience with HIV is through the translation of information, but from a Zimbabwean context. And with that, I find, even with newcomers that may be struggling with HIV, they might not be as open to sharing that or disclose that because of the traumas that they've experienced, the stigmas that it came with, the fears that it came with, the all these effects that it has. So when I look at again Jesus' approach, when he did good, he wasn't doing good to sort of get a response. You just do good and you let the results play out. And so just I'd give you maybe encouragement to say, just going out of your way to make that resource and that space available probably says a lot much more than you recognize, because for them they might not be at a place where they could disclose it, but they recognize, what, there are spaces, this is an environment, this is maybe a country that does service the needs and is compassionate enough to see that there is a need. They do cater to my struggle. So I would say, just the attempt to walk into these spaces and provide these platforms, even without a response from the people, it is a sermon in itself. It is an encouragement in itself. So I would say that. To the second comment, that, the person confesses their sins, but they still feel that God is not there for them. And I do understand. I do understand, because that's a part of the human experience in our connection with God. I've been there, done that, and it's a continual battle every day, sort of fighting the doubt in your mind. But remember, just faith is not feeling, and those two things are separate. My feelings will tell me another thing. My feelings fluctuate. Some days are good, some days are bad. You're not always feeling good, but because God stays the same, just have the hope that, educate your feelings, to tell them, no, you feel this way, but the fact is this. And so that would just be my encouragement to you. Now, as to the question of faith and science, I believe that God is the foundation of everything, and that God is the author of science, and that all true science is in harmony with God's words, with God's works. And so, it is Him who gives men the education, the ability, the capacity to discover, to make the discoveries and the inventions and the development we've made in science and in art and all these other subjects that we're dealing with worldwide, whether it's technological advancement, whatever it is in the science world, in the medical fields, it is the wisdom, it is the intelligence that God gives man. And so, yes, science and faith are one in the same. Now, just like anything in the world, there's a level of corruption at in companies and workplaces and churches and any institution. As long as it's on planet Earth, there is a level of corruption. And so that doesn't, science is not exempt from that. There are parts of science that you'll find are not in harmony with God's word. And so as a Christian, we are told the things that are not in harmony with his works and with his word, then you do what? You are able to check those things out and accept those things, those theories, those teachings that are in line with his word, as he is the foundation of all teaching, the foundation of all education, the foundation and the author of science. And so, yes, science and faith do go hand in hand. And like Asha said, when we go out of our way to connect our health professionals, connect organizations such as this to educate within the context of faith and religious circles, that effort in itself will do much for the people in the communities.
Thank you, Melissa. Asha, you've got something to add on to that?
Yeah, I completely forgot to address the disclosure aspect.
That's okay.
So one thing I think is really important is it is really important that when we bring topics of HIV into faith-based spaces, that we are intentional about how we bring it up, and also to protect people's disclosure. So I'm a person who solely believes that like your HIV status is your HIV status, and that you should have the right to disclose and not disclose whenever you want. And so I think that when we bring these conversations into faith-based places, we also need to teach them and let them know that like because of the stigma, I don't have to tell you about how stigmatizing HIV is, but because of that, we need to be careful about who we disclose what to. And a little bit about my religion. In Islam, we believe that even when someone is quote unquote sinning, right? I'm not allowed to point out in front of people that, hey, what you're doing is wrong, or hey, what you're doing is a sin. It's actually supposed to be something where I'm supposed to pull you aside and actually keep your quote unquote secret. So when I think about, so what I want to do eventually is have these conversations in the Muslim community. And one thing I will do when I do bring this up is reminding them of that aspect of like, just so you know, you are actually sinning by disclosing someone's status. That's not your business. That's not what you're supposed to be doing. And so, yeah, so having a bigger conversation about that. And also, I think that's where the responsibility of the faith-based leaders needs to come. It shouldn't have to be people living with HIV that are coming up to the faith-based leaders and being like, can you talk about these things? It should be something that's already being talked about. It should be them initiating it. And they need to know that they are the gatekeepers of a lot of things like acceptance and understanding, and they have a lot of power. And it's their responsibility to protect people. So thinking about that. So yeah, I do think that I'm excited about maybe I'm gonna reach out to some people and we're gonna maybe have some events and talk about this stuff. So I'm very, very excited. Yeah. But I'll bring up confidentiality right off the bat.
I'm excited for you, and I'm excited for myself as well because I want to be part of that as well. So yeah, looking back at faith and just religion in its broad aspect, um, there's well, we've got a lot of religions out there, and we've got a lot of things or deities that people believe in, right? Um, Someone can come and say, I believe that my great 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 grandfather who's dead is looking over me. And then Melissa comes and says, there's only one God, the God that we serve. And then Asha comes and then they say we've got a God, but we worship him in a certain way. And then somebody else comes and then they say they believe in this. And these are all uh, faith that people have in certain things or deities, as we may call them. And then somebody comes from wherever, and then they say, if you believe so much in that, why then are you going through this? Like we've seen from other people who actually have commented to say, I've been praying and I've been doing this, but nothing has happened. And some have actually been thrown out of their homes by their families because they have disclosed that they're living with HIV. And some are actually struggling because they are failing to be accepted in spaces where they would find support. So, you as faith leaders or as people who have a strong standing in something that they believe in, what words of advice would you give to people who have some kind of faith? They are people of faith. They believe in something, but they are struggling with being accepted in their families or in their communities. What word, what word of advice would you give to uh, people like that? I hope I put myself across in a way that you understood.
For me, in Islam, we believe that that God does not put us through things that we can't get through. And for me, that has helped me in my life. I've been through a lot of things in my life. And one thing that I always remind myself is that if I couldn't handle this in this moment, God would not put me through it. I think, and I just want to say that might not work for everyone, but for me, that worked. And knowing that like right now I'm going through it, but it will not be forever. It's not permanent. It is a time in my life where I'm going through something difficult. And a lot of times when I go through a difficult situation, I'm not able to see things as they are. I'm going through it, right? So the thing that I do later is like once I'm a little bit outside of the woods, as some people might say, I'm able to go back and reflect on what I learned from that situation and what I can take away from that. Um, so repeat the question because I think I forgot parts of it.
I was saying, what words of advice would you give to somebody, so to people of faith who are
Okay.
struggling with acceptance within their families and their communities as well?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so another thing I always think about, and in Islam, it's a teaching that we have, is that let me think. We believe that sometimes a situation that we think is bad for us may be good for us, and maybe the situation that's making us go like very upset and stressed might actually have a secret gift to it. Maybe God is trying to remove something from your life. And so, like, for example, I had an issue where I had to move out of my house. And at the time, I thought it was the worst thing in the world. Um, and like finding rent in Toronto was like, it was terrible, right? Um, and what I didn't realize in the moment was that it was actually a blessing in disguise that I had to leave because I found something better. And it was actually something that mental health wise, it helped me so much to move out of that situation that I was in. Um, and maybe if that situation didn't happen, I would still be in that situation. So I'm not trying to say that like I don't want to ever dismiss anyone's experiences, but for me, that's what helps me get through it, and that's what makes my faith stronger. Um, each and every time something like that happened to me, I've realized that like I kind of needed those things to happen to me for me to change and be the person that I am today. And that's a hard thing for people to realize. And some people might not, and that's totally okay. But for me, that's what keeps me in the faith, keeps me being a Muslim, is knowing that one, things are not going to be like this forever. There's a lesson to be learned here, and maybe something good might come out of this. Yeah.
Thank you, Asha. I'll let Melissa speak before I go on to the next
Okay.
point.
I would say that, I've learned in this life that when you depend on human beings have the ability to, or the capacity to disappoint you, And I think there are some times where we look for sympathy in certain spaces from certain people and you don't get it. You look for compassion and you don't find it. You look for love and you get hate. You look for understanding and you get people who are committed to misunderstand. That's the human experience. And I think that, like you said, when it comes to acceptance with HIV or just natural human or the process of life, we will all come face to face with that, and so what I've learned when it comes to faith is that I have to find something uh, that is a constant, a variable that is a constant, because everything around me is not consistent. It may not be. One day it's like this, the next day it's like this. One day even your relationship with your mother is good, and maybe the next day it's not. And people disappoint you. They're not there for you. But nonetheless, I found that God is that constant variable. He's the same. I'm the same yesterday, today, and forever. So that constant, that consistent variable that never changes is what will keep me firm. As a person of faith, in terms of the Christian denomination, I look at Jesus, the one who we are following. And I say, he walked the human experience. There was a time when even the prominent people around at this time, the rabbis and the Sanhedrin and the rulers, in the Roman Empire were like, what good thing could come out of Nazareth? That's what the Bible says. Meaning, they were too like, how could the Savior of the world come out of poverty? So even then, his external circumstance didn't make sense when it came to his position. He's the king, the savior of the world, but he's coming through poverty. So he wasn't accepted. He wasn't accepted from the very people who were teaching and preaching every day about him, because his external circumstance wasn't good enough. He was low in terms of status. So that human experience gives me hope. I look at him when he was suffering in Gethsemane, and the Bible says he was sweating great drops of blood. And he went with his friends there, but when he found them, they were sleeping. He had said to them, pray for me, watch, stay awake and pray for me. But he went 3 times and he found them sleeping while he was going through the worst of the human experience, worse than any human being will ever go through, to, sweat drops of blood. But even then, he looked for sympathy, and where he thought he would find sympathy, the Savior of the world was looking at a human being for sympathy, for encouragement. He couldn't find it. He found them sleeping. So my point is, if the Savior could have been disappointed, if he had looked to humanity even for sympathy and didn't get it, if he came and lived a life that wasn't the greatest, from poverty to being mistreated, spit upon, hated for nothing, for doing good, these things give me hope in that the person that I'm following, or the God that I am following, the God that, that represents me, that loves me, he understands. He's touched with the feelings of my infirmities. He knows the human experience. And so that gives me hope. That gives me hope that even when I'm facing rejection, when I'm facing trials, when I'm facing pain and lack of acceptance and whatever it is, that I can look at that constant variable and say, if he did it and overcame, then I can do it. I look at the interactions he had with multiple people that he was healing, and those who were sick, the woman with the issue of blood, people who, in terms of the way society looked at them, they would be shunned. But he placed himself strategically in positions where he could have conversations with the Samaritans, people that, because of the prejudice at that time, he wasn't even supposed to be having communications with women, with especially a woman from a heathen nation. But he strategically, the Savior of the world, placed himself while he's, walking day to day, strategically placing himself at the right time to meet the right person in the right place. Because he looks beyond. He looked at the heart. He knew that when I move on the heart, or this heart is willing to accept me in this heart, I know what this heart needs. And so he met the need at that place, at that location. So, just looking at how divinity works to accommodate, to show compassion and sympathy with the human nature, looking at how God was able to send his son to experience that, so that I don't excuse myself, so that I can look at it and say, you know what, I have a God who is like me, who faced things, who felt it like me. I think that will definitely give us hope in these situations where we don't feel accepted, when you don't have answers to this life. You're asking yourself, why? I didn't do anything to deserve this. I'm doing the best that I can, but why is this happening to me? And then we look at Christ, we look at the people he met, and we say, he can redeem me. It's redemptive, it's healing.
Oh, thank you so much, Melissa. Growing up, I never would get myself into, uh, arguments or, discussions to do with religion and faith, because I'd just say, I do not want. So I'd like to just point it out to you that, I reached out to quite a number of people, and, people are careful because you do not want to be seen as representing everyone who believes in what you believe, like what you're saying. So I'd really want to commend you guys for being courageous to be part of this conversation. We're talking about faith, religion, and HIV, which are, two things that most people would not really want to talk about. But I think we had great insights. We may not have, had buttered everything, but we did get some things out of it. And I know some conversations have been born out of this as well. So yeah, for people who are in attendance, I would really like to thank you. And I think that this has actually been one of the most difficult conversations that we've had, because, some things you cannot really get them out there because you're also being careful. But we actually did get something. I think Asha has something to say.
Sorry, I know that we're like way past time. My quick thing is just to think about how many of the things in my life are man-made problems and how many are actually from God. And that also helped me with picking, like, staying in my faith, because a lot of the issues that we face is actually other human beings doing this to us. So I think, yeah, that was the last thing I wanted to say. Moving on.
Thank you. I think regardless of what we believe in, what religion you belong to, at the end of the day, I think we just need to be supportive of each other and make the spaces accommodative of each other. So maybe just last words from you, Melissa, or from you, Asha, before we call it a day.
Melissa, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, any last words? Ooh, I wish it was in the form of a question. Um, hmm. I guess it would just be a reminder of a principle in my faith. I think of the Bible verse that says, in Matthew 22:37-39, it says, thou shalt love the Lord God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind, and that is the first and great commandment. And the second is like the first, and thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. And so that's where we get the golden rule. I think when we're dealing with matters of, HIV, acceptance, and stigmas, that golden rule, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, whether I am the victim of HIV and the stigmas and the stereotypes, or whether I'm on the other end. I did mention when it comes to the Zimbabwean context, it did affect the nation. It affected family building. Now you are scared to even build a family because you don't know how this thing's being transmitted, but children are born with it, stuff like that. Or some people were even scared, like, you take a bite of my sandwich, maybe I'm going to get infected. You touch me, maybe I'll be infected. Maybe you breathe on me, maybe I'll be infected. So understanding that these traumas and these experiences that, those who have HIV are experiencing are also are also traumas that those who don't, who may not have it, also face. So we have to give mercy to one another, and as we try and as we seek to, I want to commend the different organizations and individuals, even within this conversation, who do go out of their ways, whether it's in faith circles or in the community, to educate the people. That is essentially the most important thing: educating one another, giving mercy, understanding that we all have, misunderstandings. Sometimes we're ignorant of certain things. And some of us maybe just do have bad character, but even then I remain composed. Even when I'm mistreated, I remain composed. I have that character, and I show somebody what it is to have that love that they may lack. And that's essentially what God, that is an expression of the love that you have for God. So when you love God, you will love people. When you love God and you say you're a person of faith, no matter what faith you come from, I'm sure that is a representation of your deity. That is a representation of your principles, of your, of whatever it is that you believe. And so thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, the golden rule. If we remember that in life, in the way that we handle one another, manage one another, then the world will be a better place. So that is the law of self-respect, that we are the property of God. And if I matter and if I want to be valued, then the next person should be respected the same. And so I would just encourage each and every one of us a part of this conversation to do our part. It doesn't take much. It can be something little. It doesn't have to be this big old project, but you just start. You do something, whether it's conversations, whether like we're having now, just do the best that you can to make the world a better place and help people understand what it is or the subject at hand, what it is that we're going through. So thank you very much for allowing me to be part of this conversation. I too learned a lot, and I had to sort of dig deep to remember, what do I know about this topic? What do I don't know about this topic? And I know for me, there's a lot to learn, and much more opportunities, even with the platforms that I may have, to have such conversations, because I've never even thought about it. As a church leader, as a church member, I've never thought about, the truth is, I've never thought about HIV. I've heard, again, the translation of information, but inviting me to this has sort of pricked my mind as well, to say this is actually a topic and maybe something that even my closest of friends are going through. Who knows? You don't know, because of the laws of privacy and such not. But it's really important. So thank you for opening my mind. Thank you for the education, and I hope to continue to educate and learn and learn. Thank you very much.
Thank you
My
so very
last
much.
word, sorry. My last word is just, let's have more of these conversations. I'm very excited to talk more on this. So
Thank you so
I
much,
will just add to that thank you to our attendees and all the panelists. And this is definitely not the end. This is definitely the beginning. So two more to come.
Oh, yes, it is. And thank you so very much for everyone who took their time to be part of this conversation and took their time to listen in on this conversation. You had your hand up, Nomvelo. I think we had something in the
No,
question and answer.
it's all good.
All right, and thank you so much to you, Asha and Melissa, for being brave enough to come and talk, um, about this very delicate converse in this conversation that's very kind of very delicate, and you need to pick your diction well, and be very careful of what you say, and you did manage to just be brave enough to do that. Thank you so much. Um, and thank you to everyone. I think this brings us to the end of our conversation. Hopefully we'll have more of these. Thank you.